like to praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for making it easy for us to be here together, to listen to a lecture that is going to be given by our Honorable Professor Dr. Abdul Rahman Hussein. And secondly, I would like to to appreciate the contribution that is done by the Office of International Institute for Muslim Unity to organize this monthly talk that is about related to issues related to Muslim Ummah. And as usual, before we proceed with the talk, so let me just briefly introduce to you the speaker of our today's monthly talk. Just this will take, so he's Prof. Dr. Abdul Rahman Hussein Obaid. He is a professor of Quranic and Sunnah Studies, and he has joined since 2007. He joined University Science Malaysia, USIM, until today. He has been serving there as a professor in the field of Quran and Sunnah Studies. And the topic of his talk will be on Islamic Ummah in Orientalist heritage. Now, when you look at briefly on his education background, according to what I know personally, Prof. Abdul Rahman Hussein, since at the early age when I was doing my undergraduate in the old University of International Islamic University Malaysia in PJ, since then we can see that he graduated, or he finished his PhD in Quran and Sunnah Studies from the International Islamic University Malaysia in 2005. And since then, he has joined the Faculty of Quranic and Sunnah Studies, University Science, Islam Malaysia. And when you look at his teaching experience, according to what I have observed, he has taught many courses in his field since the day he started until today, as well as he supervised more than 30 PhD and master students from his faculty in the University Science Malaysia, as well as other universities locally and internationally. And he has completed more than 10 research projects in his field of specialization. So he has done even field works. He has been the principal researcher in all the researches, as well as co-researcher. And the most important thing when I look at, he has developed his personality by presenting many papers locally and internationally. It is like more than 13 international conferences that he attended inside and outside Malaysia. And another important thing that would like to know about Prof. Dr. Abdul Rahman Hussein, that he published until today 7 books, and as well as he contributed in different books by writing chapters in different, related to his expertise. And when I look at the research papers that he published internationally in many refereed journals, locally and internationally, as well as at the level of Scopus and ISI. So based on my knowledge, he published more than 30 research papers, and that has contributed to his development from the intellectual perspective. At the same time, Prof. Dr. Abdul Rahman Hussein, he has served in the university as well as in the faculty where he belongs to, in different posts, in administrative posts, as well as he holded the post of being in the quality insurance, as well as in curriculum and in other activities related to the faculty that is. So now that is all what I can say about Prof. Dr. Abdul Rahman related to his personality. So now, without any further delay, I would like to invite Prof. Dr. Abdul Rahman to give his speech for 1 hour. So we are going to give 1 hour to Dr. Abdul Rahman. Then we are going to have question and answer session. But at the same time, we leave it up to him if he is going to talk less than that. But we want to finish this within 1 hour. Then later on, we have the question and answer. Fatafaddal mashkuran. Please, Prof. Dr. Abdul Rahman, the floor is yours.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة وخير التسليم على سيدنا وحبيبنا محمد الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وعلى من تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. بعد. Dear Chairman, Dr. Fatir Sheikhu, our great Ustaz Muhammad Attar Misawi, and other the doctors that I know, Dr. Abdul Wahid, all respected audience. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam.
Ramadan Mubarak for all of you. تقبل الله منا ومنكم صالح الأعمال. I am honored to be with you today, and I am thankful to the International Institute for Muslim Unity, IIMU, under the International Islamic University, Malaysia, for conducting this forum and inviting me to deliver a speech on this topic, Islamic Ummah in Orientalist heritage. So let me begin with a simple introduction to this topic. This introduction is about the development of the terms and conceptions, especially the Quranic terms and conceptions. As you know, some vocabularies like Salat has been developed into conceptions later. It was used by Arabs for Islam, and it has its meaning, original meaning, like Yusalli as an example. Yadu, the original meaning was Yadu. Zakat, original meaning, it has been developed by the Holy Quran. We understand it in a different way. It is not only dua. Salah is salah that we know. And zakah is not tahara. So the context is very important to determine is the original meaning for the vocabulary used or has been used as a conception. Let's look at the vocabulary of Ummah. We are talking about Islamic Ummah. So Ummah yummu imam al-Ummah to gather. Imam because he is gathering people behind him. Also because she is gathering her children around her. So this is the original meaning of the vocabulary Amma. Then the conception has been developed by the Quran. It is important to understand this point because verses are mentioning Ummah in its original use, like this verse, وَالذَّكَرَ بَعْدَ أُمَّةٍ, about Prophet Joseph, Yusuf. When he was in the jail and some of the prisoners had been released, and he asked him to mention him in the presence of the king. But that prisoner who was preparing wine for the king, he forgot for a couple of years. And when the king started talking about his dream, the 7 cups, I thought you know this story. That man, he suddenly remembered Prophet Joseph. وَالذَّكَرَ بَعْدَ أُمَّةٍ. Why Quran used Ummah here? Didn't say ذَكَرَ بَعْدَ سِنِينَ بَعْدَ عِدَّةِ سِنِينَ as example. Ummah also here is a number of years. But Quran used carefully this vocabulary, this word, just to show how it was long period for Prophet Joseph, because he was in the jail. If said as example, وَالذَّكَرَ بَعْدَ عِدَّةِ سِنِينَ أو أعوام as example, so we wouldn't have that impression like using Ummah. الذَّكَرَ بَعْدَ Ummah shows how these years, it could be 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years maybe, it shows it was very long years for Prophet Joseph. Because he was suffering in the jail, and he had a hope that prisoner, that released prisoner, will mention him. And the king will be convinced that Joseph is innocent. But it doesn't happen. And he was waiting and waiting. So the use of Ummah here was on some purposes, for sure. But it is not as a concept. The point here, it is not as a concept. But another verses, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا لِتَكُونُوا شُهَدَاءَ عَلَى النَّاسِ وَيَكُونَ الرَّسُولُ عَلَيْكُمْ شَهِيدًا. Here is a concept. Ummah here is used as a concept. What is Ummah, Muslim Ummah? Muslim Ummah is a spiritual religious unity of different nations based on creed. So we have different nations, different languages, different cultures, but we have one religion. And maybe these nations are living far away from each other geographically. That's not the point, because it is a spiritual religious unity based on aqidah, based on creed. Our nation or ummah was mentioned in the Quran in the singular form more than 50 times. So this is the Quranic use of ummah. What about the Muslims' use of ummah? In the last century, the concept of ummah has been developed under the ascendancy of nationalism. We had Turkish ummah, Arabic ummah, Iranian ummah, after the collapse of Ottoman Empire. So that collapse was reason behind such development of ummah from the Quranic perspective to Muslim perspective. That was a decline, actually. A decline of the spiritual and philosophical use of ummah. It was because Muslims lost their power. There was no more power. They were struggling to build up their own countries. So they called themselves Ummah, Al-Ummah Al-Arabiya, Al-Ummah Al-Turkiya. So the use of Ummah became very limited. It was not holistic and comprehensive. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, please, Shadwan. Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, because the
It is
screen
great.
suddenly disappeared. I thought something happened. Okay, the holistic and comprehensive use of Ummah by the Quran was declined by Muslims in the last century because they lost their empire, they lost their power. And the Western understanding of nation actually was the same during the 19th and 20th century. But there was also development of using the concept of nation in the West that time. So the Western understanding of the concept of nation is based on some factors like the language, history, race, region, common interests, traditions, and culture. And nations are one of the most important sources and important sources of political power in the modern world. It is important to study the role of nations and nationalism in the formation of nation states and how religions have helped to establish national identities during the formation of nation states. Why we have to understand these points? Because the great names among the Orientalists that we are about to view some of their opinions lived in that time. They also lived under the impact of the philosophy, of the traditions, the culture, the politics of the time. So they were not far away from the impact of that development of nation and how nationalism developed in the West during the 18th century, 20th century. One of the Orientalists that we are about to discuss is Theodor Noldacker. Theodor Noldacker was a German Orientalist, and he wrote an important book about the history of Quran almost in 1860. So that time, Europe also was struggling to build up the nations, their countries, based on their new understanding of nations. So Ummah also has been developed, nation has been developed in the Western literature and politics. And those Orientalists wrote under the ascendancy of such development. So Noldak's views of the Islamic State, as example, was based on the Western understanding of use of force in imposing religious teachings. Hence, the Medinan stage, according to his classification of the Quranic chapters, Medinan stage represents only a transition from the stage of peace to the stage of law. So Theodore Noldaka classified the Quranic chapters into 4 stages. The first Meccan stage, the second Meccan stage, the third Meccan stage, and the Medinan period. His explanation of the state was relevant to the Medinan period. According to Noldaka understanding and many Orientalists, the Islamic Ummah took its shape in Rashidun Caliphate, not in the prophetic era. Because in Rashidun Caliphate, Muslims were able to extend their control over a large area of the lands that the Persians and Romans ruled before. Before that, the control was in Arabia only. In Rashidun time, especially in the time of Umar ibn Khattab, he witnessed the collapse of the Persian Empire completely, and the partial collapse of the Roman Empire in Middle East and parts of North Africa. So their understanding actually is always based on this historical point of view, that Ummah has been founded in the time of Rashidun. They are not studying this conception as a Quranic conception. These conceptions has been developed by the Quran, and it has its real meaning over there. So we have to make research in the Quranic verses to find out the real meaning of Islamic Ummah. But for these Orientalists like Noldaka and others, they are searching for Islamic history, because Quran itself is a historical book in their belief. So before that, there was no Islamic Ummah. Before the Rashidun Caliphate, there was no Islamic Ummah. Also, some historians like Hamilton Gibb and Arnold Quimby, also they discussed and they present the conception of Islamic Ummah based on this understanding, based on the view that it was found during the Rashidun time and has been reached its golden age in the Abbasid Caliphate, not before. So there is no bridge between the historical understanding of Islamic Ummah and the Quranic conception of Islamic Ummah. There is no bridge. This is an important point when we study the views of Noldaka, Arnold Quimby, or Hamilton Gibb on the development of Islamic Ummah, historically or as a conception. Arnold Toynbee, as example, he is not only a historian, he is a philosopher. And his book about the civilizations is a very important book all time. But how he classified the Islamic caliphates and kingdoms in his book. He considered the Abbasid Caliphate the gold age of Islamic state and Islamic Ummah. But when it comes to the Ottoman Empire, Arnold Toynbee has totally different views. How? Ottoman Empire ruled Islamic countries for more than 500 years, and it was the longest dynasty that ruled Muslims in 1,400 years. More than Umayyad Caliphate, more than Abbasid Caliphate together, more the Fatimid, Ayyubid, or the Sultanate and Emirates kingdoms in the Islamic history. So the Ottoman Empire is very important period that should be studied. Arnold Toynbee considered this period, 500 years, as incomplete civilized empire. And he repeated this statement many times, considering the Ottoman Empire as incomplete civilized kingdom or empire. His understanding of the empire or Islamic Ummah was not based only on the power, and that was good actually. That was good attitude. Was not only based on how powerful was that kingdom or that empire, but how rich it was from inside. The contribution of many nations. Is the language used was international language or was just imposed by power, and after this power disappeared, the language also disappeared. In the Abbasid Caliphate, according to him, the language lived until today, regardless the collapse of the kingdom itself, but the language of the empire lived. Maybe there was another reason for behind that the Arabic language is the language of Holy Quran, and Quran is eternal book. Turkish language is not. What about the Persian language? Persian language was used by so many emirates and kingdoms ruled the Islamic countries in Islamic history. Used by the Mughals in India and used by Al-Buwayhiyin in Iran, Samaniyin and others, and even by the Ottomans at the beginning, before they replaced it with the Turkish language. One of the sultans of the Ottoman, he was thinking to make the Arabic language an official language, Sultan Suleiman the Great, but Shaykh al-Islam that time, he didn't support this idea. Then the Turkish language was the official language. But in my opinion, the plan of the Sultan himself was smarter than fatwa of Sheikh al-Islam. Because as a language, the Arabic language is the language of the Holy Quran. But the Turkish language has been developed for centuries. It was under the impact of Persian language at the beginning. It has been developed, mixed with more Arabic vocabularies and terms, conceptions. And after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire has been totally changed. It developed under the French, German, and European languages. So that language was still under development. But the Arabic language was already developed and adopted by the Holy Quran. So in the views of Arnold Toynbee, since the language was not international, was not so powerful, that means the life of this civilization also is limited and won't span for a long time. Actually, the Ottoman Empire ruled for more than 500 years. So the point of Arnold Toynbee was we shouldn't look at power only to determine that this empire is civilized or the golden age of Islam or Islamic Ummah is true, is reality or not, or just a conception. And in criticism of the views of Toynbee, we cannot deeply criticize these views actually, because the details of the Ottoman lives were not translated into many languages, including Arabic. The political life, yes, was translated, but the culture, traditions, and the writings of the scholars were not translated until today. And maybe for Arnold Toynbee also that was a good reason behind his conclusion. So why Arnold Toynbee considered the Ottoman Empire incomplete civilized kingdom? Because, in his understanding, Turks from the Central Asia, they ruled during the first 2 centuries of their conquest, and their sultans subjected their Christian population of Asia Minor, Turkey, and southeastern Europe, like Albania, Montenegro, Kosovo, Greece, compelling part of these populations to embrace Mohammedanism, to embrace Islam. And according to him, supporting their own power by seizing the children of the rest and forcing them to convert to Islam and making out of them the army, the outstanding army, the Yanizaris or Al-Ishariya in Arabic. Because of all of these reasons, Arnold Toynbee is considering Ottomans cruel, criminals, dictators, not open-minded. Especially, they ended their empire by a massacre of Armenians. Armenians who were the first people to make Christianity their national religion. But the Turkish conquest destroyed all of this beautiful meaning of the Armenian national religion and culture. So this about Arnold Toynbee, one of the Orientalists, one of the historians, one of the philosophers of history, actually. How he explained, how he presented in his book, the Islamic Ummah separated from the Quranic understanding of this conception. Another Orientalist, David Samuel Margolius, Margolius, he belonged to a Jewish family converted to Christianity in 20th century. And he was a professor of Arabic at University of Oxford. He wrote many books and he translated some books from Arabic to English. Some of his important writings were Muhammad and the rise of Islam, the early development of Muhammadan. He was not historian, but he was interested in about Islamic Sirah, prophetic biography, and Islamic history in general. And he was a brilliant editor and translator. He translated the apologies of Abu al-Ala al-Ma'ri, as example, which were very difficult. Its language structure very difficult. And also his historical book, The Eclipse of the Abbasid Caliphate in 1920. His historical books actually are classical references for other Orientalists in his time and until today. He is not like Arnold Toynbee in his deep scrutiny of history and his analysis. But his analysis of Sirah and Islamic history is very traditionally acceptable, more acceptable among the Orientalists and the students who are interested in Islamic history. So it is a classical reference for historical development of Islamic state. In his book, Muhammad and the Rise of Islam, he talked a lot about the relations between Muslims and Jews. Of course, this is not the point for our topic, but it is an important issue actually. Why? Those who has the Orientalist who has Jewish background, they understand more about the spirit of Islam and the conception of Islamic Ummah, because it is very close to their understanding of the Jewish Ummah. Because the Jewish nation is based on race and religion, culture, political interest, and it is very close to our understanding to Islamic Ummah. So their understanding is more deeper actually, and their presentation also looks little bit better than Arnold Quimby, but not deeper in details. Another Orientalist that we have to mention is Ignaz Goldziher. Ignaz Goldziher also belongs to a Jewish family. Yes, he was influenced by the German Orientalists, and he wrote in German, and he followed the views of Moldaka, Shibali, Otritzel, and other German Orientalists. But he had a Jewish background, and he practiced Islam also. He and Huston Smith also practiced Islam, the American priest and philosopher, theologian. He practiced Islam for more than 25 years, maybe 27 years. He was praying 5 times a day, like any Muslim. He was fasting Ramadan like us nowadays. But he never converted to Islam. The point was, behind practicing Islam is you cannot understand any religion only by reading about it. We have to practice it. We have to live it in our daily life until we be able to understand the spirit of this religion. Ignaz Goldziher, he practiced Islam when he traveled to Egypt, and he attended some lectures of Rashid Rida in Al-Azhar. Some of the Muslim thinkers who criticized Ignaz Goldziher, they said it was hypocrisy. He was trying to hide his identity. But this is not true actually. In his diary, he said, when he talked to Sheikh Al-Azhar that time, he said that he is not Muslim. He is from Ahl al-Kitab. So he frankly talked to them. But he practiced Islam like Muslims to be able for more deep understanding, especially to touch the spirit of this religion. Hassan Smith, he practiced for a long time, more than Ignaz Goldziher. But he's writing his chapter about Islam in his famous book, The World's Religions, is not talking about Islamic history like Margoliouth or like Arnold Quimby or even like Ignaz Goldziher. His analysis is focusing more about the details of worshipping, the meaning of Aqidah, the meaning of worshiping. And these issues, Quimby and others, they never discussed in this book, in their books. So Ignaz Goldziher understood the spirit of Islam because he had the Jewish background. Second, because he practiced Islam for a while. He was reading the Islamic sources in Arabic language, in its original language, not like the Orientalists today. They know only English or their national languages. The big name among Orientalists like Noldeka, Joseph Shah, Ignaz Jiher, they were reading directly from the Islamic sources and could understand the Islamic books. That's why Ignaz Goldziher is an important name among the Orientalists that have followed or trace his opinion about the Islamic Ummah as a concept. But the problem of his writings, he is not dedicating a chapter or a book to talk about the development of Islamic Ummah. Never, he never did that. But his views could be collected from here and there, from different chapters. And some of his views in his diary, and we don't know he changed his mind or his views in the diary that he wrote when he was young controlled his mind until his death. That's a point we are not sure about. But his book about Al-Khawarij is an important introduction to understand the views of Goldziher about Islamic Ummah. By this, I come to the end of my presentation. It's less than 1 hour, but I think it was enough for me. I am very thankful for your patience. Barakallahu fikum wa nafa'a bikum wa taqabbala ta'atikum wa ja'alakum min al-radiyyin wa radiya ankum wa athabakum جنانه وجعلكم من عتقاء شهر رمضان والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Allahumma amin. Barakallah fiqh, Prof. Dr. Abdul Rahman Hussein, for this insightful presentation that you just made. Let me just give you a brief summary of the presentation, then we can open for question and answers. So when you look at the presentation that is related to the Orientalist views on the Islamic Ummah, so Prof. Dr. Abdul Rahman has mentioned certain important figures that are known among the Orientalists who discussed directly and indirectly the concept of Ummah. So he tackled here, when you look at the beginning, looking at the historical perspective as well as the Quranic perspective, where most of the Orientalists, according to him, did not look at it from the Quranic perspective, rather they look at it from the historical point of view, and especially even some of them did not consider, like he mentioned Toynbee and others, the time of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but they started with the historical development of the Ummah at the time of Khulafa Rashidin, and they did not consider the Quranic point of view. Therefore, he commented on that there should be a study to look at it from the Quranic point of view. And when you look at the most important names that he mentioned here about the Orientalists, Arnold Toynbee, he mentioned another important Orientalist, that is Noldeke, Theodore Noldeke, that he wrote about the history of the Quran at the early stage. And later on, we can see that another important, figure among the Orientalists who wrote, about the Islamic Ummah, that was David Samuel Mergelov, where he talked at the beginning about referring to the writing about the Muhammad and the rise of Islam. And later on, when you look at the last Orientalist that was mentioned by Prof. Dr. Abdul Rahman, that is Ignaz Goldziher, that how did he present his views in his book, not as a single chapter, but he mentioned, according to him, in his book, that therefore it needs a study to identify and to bring out his views, as well as he mentioned his diary that he used to keep with him, and that is something that is very important for us in order to know their views about the Islamic Ummah and how it developed, And another important thing that I would like to mention to you that was, mentioned by Prof. Dr. Abdurrahman, how the Orientalists, they linked the concept of Ummah or their perception about Ummah with the nation states, and that is related to the developments that they take place in the West, starting from the Renaissance until today. So they look at it from that point of view. So Barakallahu Fiqh, Prof. Dr. Abdurrahman, that is indeed very thoughtful and meaningful to us, this presentation. So now we open for question and answers as well as comments. So you can make questions directly to the speaker, please. So we have time until 12:30.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam, Dr. Abdullah. Please.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Abdurrahman, for this very thoughtful and speech on this topic. I just wondering, how about the now? I mean, is there any, perhaps if you know any Orientalist in our modern time, how they view this topic, the Islamic Ummah, because now everything has been changed. So is there any Orientalist, I mean, maybe presenting a new opinion on this concept of Ummah? And so my question is about the modern Orientalist. Perhaps if you know, but if, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for Dr. Abdul Wahid for this question. Today, the European researchers are not calling themselves Orientalists anymore, as you know. But they are Orientalists because they are following the method of the Orientalists. This one point. Second point, they are following the opinions of those Orientalists. And the main sources for them are their writings, actually. And as I said, nowadays, those researchers or these modern Orientalists are not interested in learning Arabic, Persian, Turkish, or any other Islamic languages in general, because they know German language, English language, French language, and for them, this is enough, because they have enough books written by the earlier Orientalists, and for them, it is perfect writings. One of them is Wansbrough. Wansbrough, a British Orientalist, he tried to form a theory about crystallization of the Quran. So his theory is well known as crystallization of the Quran. And his views was supported by an Israeli historian and researcher, Nevos. So both of them, they wrote about the Islamic development of nation or Ummah by writing about the development of the Quran at the beginning. And their theory is based on that Quran was not written in the time of the Prophet, but it was written later on the Abbasid time and after that. Why they said that? Because the Islamic Ummah was in its golden age, and Muslims were living in civilization. So they were able to provide a book like a Quran. But in Arabia, in the time of the Prophet ﷺ and Rashidun caliphs, the environment was not helpful. They were just living in a desert with no libraries, with no academies. So there was nothing that supporting to conduct and create a book like the Holy Quran. So their understanding of the development of the holy text is based on the development of Islamic Ummah. So this is the name that I can remember now, Wansbro and Nebo. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Prof. Abdul Rahman. Yeah, please, others, we're waiting for others to ask a question or make a comment. Yeah, maybe since others are thinking to ask a question or make a comment. So I would like, Prof. Dr. Abdul Rahman, if you can elaborate a bit further when you mentioned about the looking at the Jewish background, so how did they relate when they studied the Islamic Ummah, looking at it from the Jewish background? Did that affect them, or did they look at the Muslim Ummah from that point of view, or they were affected later on, as you mentioned, by the movement that was taking place in the West? When you look at those Orientalists, they came from the Jewish background. If you can elaborate a bit further to give us a clear picture. And Dr. Abdul Rahman, there is a question here. After this, you can look at the chat.
Yeah, thank you very much. So the point, as I mentioned, that those Orientalists who had a Jewish background are more qualified to understand the concept of Ummah, more than those who are belonging to positivism school. Ignaz Goldziher he considered himself a student for Theodor Noldeke, but his understanding of Islamic Ummah is much better than the understanding of Theodor Noldeke, actually, because of his Jewish background. Why they have this better understanding? Because from the beginning we said that Islamic Ummah is a spiritual, religious unity of different nations based on creeds. So for Orientalists, it's not like this. Islamic Ummah is based on some factors like language, history, race, region, common interest, traditions, and culture. So look how they have a different understanding from the beginning. They are not looking at the spiritual unity. They are not looking at it. They consider power, geography, invasion, conquest, the most important factor in building Islamic Ummah. But for those who belong to a Jewish background, a Jewish family, they can grasp this spiritual understanding easier. Especially if we know that the Jewish understanding of nation or Ummah, the Jewish Ummah, is a bit close to our understanding. Because also it is based on creed. Yes, they don't have different nations. They are only one race, one nation, Jew. And they don't accept, usually they don't accept new converters outside of a Jewish community. But they have the creed, theology, al-aqidah. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, Barakallah Fik, Dr. Now it is very clear, I mean, why the Jewish people are very close to the perception of the Ummah from their perspective as we look at it. So there is a question that is asked by one of the students here. That is it possible to revive or rebuild the Islamic Caliphate nowadays? And is it relevant? Maybe, I don't know whether that is related directly, maybe perhaps.
Yeah, we hope, inshallah, we always have this hope and we must have this hope. Caliphate always needs nation, one nation, Arabic nation, Turkish nation, Persian nation, and a capital city, Istanbul or Baghdad or Damascus. So we need a nation and a capital city and a language that could be an international language, could be acceptable among all Muslims. Some languages don't have ability to be international, like Chinese language. Chinese language, because it is difficult, it is very difficult. They did a lot to make it an international language, but they failed actually. Only few people can learn it, and they spend years of their lives to learn Chinese language. But English is easier to learn. Arabic even is easier to learn. Some other European languages like German language is more difficult than French language, Spanish or English. So what we need to revive the Islamic Ummah or Islamic civilization again, we need a nation, a true nation, the complete nation that they dedicate their life, their wealth, their thought to Islam. And they have a center, which is a capital city. They have a center and they have a powerful language to communicate with other nations, where nations that are far away geographically from them. So in my understanding, these three elements or these three stuffs are very important in reviving the Islamic Ummah. Thank you.
Yeah, Barakallah Fik, Prof. Dr. Abdul Rahman. That is indeed very important, as you have mentioned. And the Orientalists who knew Arabic language very well, they managed to understand Islam and the concept of Ummah better compared to others. So thank you very much. This is very important. Now there is a question that is by Sister Nur Mawati. She said that the question that she has asked, it is, as we know, the works of the Orientalists are becoming more extensive and creating social exclusion of the Muslim community, thus resulting to Islamophobia. Likewise, it is said that in order to understand Islamophobia, we need to first learn Orientalism, as it creates mythologies and stereotypes. Hence, do you agree with the above statement? Would be great to hear, out your opinion on the subject matter. Barakallah Fik. Yeah, please, Prophet Dr. Abdul Rahman, would you like to ask?
Yeah, it is a good idea actually to teach Orientalism for non-Muslim, not for Muslims. To teach Orientalism for non-Muslim, so they will not be victims of Islamophobia. For those who study and understand the writings of Orientalists, actually, they are more open-minded. If you know better about Islam, you won't be scared of it. But if you know less, you will be a victim of social media. And you will follow just some news on Facebook or Twitter or some videos on clips on YouTube. So teaching Orientalism is very important for non-Muslim actually. Edward Said, he wrote an important book about Orientalism in English. He was Palestinian, he was Christian, Palestinian living in United States. And he was a lecturer at California University actually. He said, we cannot understand the European civilization comprehensively without studying Orientalism. It is an important part of the Western history, philosophy, and thought.
Dr. Abdurrahman, can you on the camera so we can, because the camera is off.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that will be better.
Yeah, so Edward Said, in his book Orientalism, he said that we cannot have a comprehensive understanding of the Western civilization and history without having a good understanding of Orientalism. It is a very important part of European history, civilization, philosophy, and thought. And today it is more important for European people, for the Western people, to study Orientalism. It is a way to prevent them from being victims for the social media and Islamophobia. What is Islamophobia? Is less understanding of Islam. Orientalism is giving you chance to have better understanding. Yes, we don't agree, we don't accept all of their views, but finally it is a window opened on Islamic history and thought. It is very important for them to study more than us. For Muslims also it is important to study their views and know how to analyze and criticize it. But for them, how to avoid Islamophobia. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, Barakallah Fik, Prof. Dr. Abdurrahman. That is very important, that what you have mentioned now, that others, they criticize on something on the basis of the ignorance about Islam. That is the reality, you know. But as you mentioned, if you may add more to this, so how can we identify this Orientalist? What would be the way that you can identify that this Orientalist is good, the other one is, because we believe that not all of them, they have portrayed such a point of view about Islam and the Islamic Ummah. So based on your experience, Prof. Dr. Abdurrahman, that how did you read the Orientalist? Can you further, maybe this would be very useful for our students and those who are learning about this subject, how to cope up, and this will help them to respond to such claims, you know, done by the Westerns. Please.
Yeah, that is an important point, my friend. Many Muslims, they have the first impression on Orientalists. They say they are enemies of Islam. They are trying to destroy Islam, to give a negative impression about Prophet Muhammad والسلام, and the Holy Quran. And because they have bad intention. So this is wrong. This is very wrong point, and it is preventing us actually from understanding it. Orientalists like Ignaz, usually the Muslim thinkers who criticized him, they used to say, he is Jew and his belonging to positivism school is nothing. Because he is Jew, he hates Islam, and he is trying to destroy Islam and to has his influence on Muslim fellows, Muslim followers. But this is wrong from the beginning. It is wrong. How we can say this Orientalist is good, this Orientalist is bad? His personal life is not important. First of all, his personal life is not important. Second, his religion also should be avoided in our judgment, because we are looking at his views. Some Muslims say Izutsu, because finally he converted to Islam, his books are very important books. But actually, he wrote these books when he was not Muslim. He became Muslim, that's good for himself. That's good for him. That's his decision. But it doesn't mean his books also connected to Islam. No. This is wrong. Muslims, they have this wrong judgment for Orientalists. They are asking, did he convert to Islam or not? Did he say some positive things about Islam or not? So we shouldn't look at that part. He converted to Islam, or he was Jew, or he was Christian, or positivist. Look at his views, study his views, and judge his views, not himself. That will be much better. Then you can say he is more close to be fair and objective, or he has a bad intention. Some of them, they had bad intention actually. Like Peter the Venerable. Peter the Venerable, of course, we cannot say he was Orientalist. He was a high priest. But when he gave his command to translate the Holy Quran from Arabic to Latin language, this translation was full of mistakes. And these mistakes done intentionally. They had bad intention. But other Orientalists like Theodore Noldeke, he is a positivist. He doesn't believe in any religion. But he doesn't have bad intention at the same time. But it doesn't mean his views are right. No. Ignaz Goldziher's views are much better than the Theodore Noldeke views. In general, those Orientalists, they didn't accept the Prophet ﷺ as a real prophet. They considered him genius, excellent teacher, a great leader, a warrior, but they didn't say he was a prophet. So this is an important point. So that means they don't accept revelation as a source of knowledge. So including Izutsu and others, they didn't accept or revelation as a source of knowledge. And this is a big problem actually. So we have to look at their conclusion, their results from this point of view. We have to look at these points. Do they believe in revelation, prophecy, holy text, or not? Or Quran for them is just document and scriptures, historical scriptures, and Prophet was just a teacher, priest, and a great leader, excellent teacher, and there is no revelation at all. So we have to look at this point, because these points differentiate between believer and non-believer. So that time we can say, oh, this Orientalist doesn't believe in religion or in prophecy or revelation at all. But that one is considering Prophet Muhammad is a bad copy of Jesus Christ as example. Some of them, they said that he's just copying from the Bible, from the Old Testament and New Testament. and Quran is a bad copy of the Bible. And some of them, among the religious Orientalists, they said, yes, he is a prophet, but he was sent to Arabs. Like some theologians, like Musa bin Maymun, as example, the Jewish theologian, he said Prophet Muhammad was a real prophet. He received the revelation like Prophet Moses, but he was sent to Arabs. And before him, some Christian theologians, they said that Abdul Masih al-Kindi, who lived in the time of Al-Ma'mun, he said that he looks like a prophet, but he was sent to Arabs. So in our judgment, we have to look at all of these things, but shouldn't consider it in our judgment. We have to look at his religious background. Is he Jew or Christian or a positivist? But we shouldn't conclude from this point. No, we have to study the views one by one. We cannot generalize also. We say all Orientalists are saying this. We have to study their views one by one, case by case. Thank you.
Yeah, Barakallah Fik, from Dr. Abdul Rahman, that was very clear. Alhamdulillah. So the parameters were mentioned by you, how to look at the writings of the scholar. If I say that, as you mentioned, very clear, that the most important thing is how to respond to their views on the study of Islam. So that is the most important thing. And you mentioned maybe that is the weakness of Muslim scholars in the past, even today. You know, they have that bad perception about a certain Orientalist by looking at them. So Alhamdulillah. So now the time is 23 minutes past 12. So if there is any last question or comment to be done, please do so before we end today's talk.
Dr. Fatmir, can I?
Yes, please, Abdul. Yeah,
one
please.
question regarding the Islamic Caliphate. Just now, Doctor mentioned about the center, the region. I mean, so again, you know, I'm having a kind of difficulty to understand. You know, if you bring these center things here into the Islamic Caliphate, what will happen? Everybody wants to be, what do you call it? The center, you know, like the Turks will say, okay, I'm the center, okay, the Islamic Caliphate should be in Istanbul. And then the Saudis will come, will say, no, it has to be in Medina because the Islam, this is how it started. And then in Tehran, they will say, okay, we want the, so is there any way to look at this Islamic Ummah, you know, rethinking the Islamic Ummah, providing a new narrative, because, you know, we are facing a future. The future will not be the same like today. We can go, you know, so that we can go beyond the conventional thinking of the way how we look at the Islamic Ummah. You know, we have a state, and then we have the Caliphate, and then in the future, in the 5 to 10 years from now, we are facing all these kind of technologies. You know, people are talking about artificial intelligence and all these progress in technology. So is there any way for the Muslim scholars, you know, come together, or we can provide a new narrative? Now in Europe, for example, Europe is facing aging population. Most of the Europeans are, you know, disappearing and then replacing by the Muslims. Muslim refugees and are there, you know. Last time I went to Germany, in one town, there are all Muslims, the Turks and Kurds and Arabs are there, you know. So I very, very hardly I could see the Europeans. The Europeans, they were just old people working in the streets. And the one who run the business, actually, they are the Muslims. So my question is, I don't know how we can, and then how we can reimagine
how can unite the Muslims, to find a center. Yeah, well, that is good point. Let us see what Prof. Dr. Abdurrahman would like to comment on this related to the concept of Ummah. Yeah, please, if you'd like to say anything, Dr. Abdurrahman.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, dear friend Abdul Wahid. Yeah, I am happy that you are so enthusiastic by looking at the situation of Muslims, refugees in Europe. I visited European countries several times, and I found, yes, there are a lot of Muslims, but they are powerless actually, and they are not united. And many of them, they lost their identity. They are facing so many challenges, countries, but those who are leading the countries are European. So this is not our point actually. What I said about the center is necessary, but it is not everything. Yes, we need a nation, we need a center, we need a language, but there should be something else also, as you said. Yes, every nation will claim that we are the one, we are the qualified one to lead, but it should be a complete nation who are really ready to serve Islam and dedicate their lives and wealth for Islam. Thank you very much.
Barakallah Fik, Dr. Abdurrahman. This is a very important thing that we have as Muslims, we have to think about it. And since you have mentioned about the topic of today's talk, it was on the Muslim Ummah. So these are very important elements that you identified, especially when you look at the language related to our deen, that is the language of the Quran. So if we look at it from that point of view, then this will unite the Muslims. Surely, and another thing that we can benefit from what you just mentioned now, it is related to those who deserve to be the leading among the Muslims. Not every Muslim nation is deserving to lead. We have to look at those who provide and contribute to the Muslim nation. So perhaps we can look at it from that point of view. And the rest, of course, we have to be examples. They say that if we have Muslims in any part of the Muslim world, if they set examples for others to be united, so I don't see any problem. Whether the center is in Malaysia or in Turkey or in Saudi or in Baghdad or whatever it is. The most important thing is that we want someone to serve the Muslim Ummah and to be the voice, as you mentioned, because now in the world we don't have the voice of the Muslim Ummah. So that is our concern here. And as you mentioned in your presentation, most of the Orientalists, they tackle some of our problems in their writings. So that will benefit us as well when we refer to these sources in order to understand ourselves better. And this will pave the way for us to unity in the future. And I believe this would be a very great idea, I say, since we are having this series of talks, inshallah, at the end we can come out with a resolution to find a way how to cope up together as a single ummah. That is very important for us, Of course, differences will be there and challenges will be there. So what we say that at the end we leave it, as we say, natawakkal ala Allah. But we have to do our part. And on behalf of the International Institute for Muslim Unity, would like to appreciate your contribution very much, Prof. Dr. Abdurrahman, and providing this insightful and very, if I can say, challenging as well for us to look at it, and especially the students, to get more knowledge about this, the approach of the others towards the Muslim Ummah. So as well as on behalf of our university, would like to thank you as well as I would like to appreciate the endurance shown by the participants in this session, and those who contributed as well by giving comments and asking questions. So may Allah bless all of us. And with that, let us close by reciting Surah Al-Asr. So this is the end of today's talk. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuhu. Fi amanillah, and have iftar mubarak, inshallah. Allah bless us.
جزاكم الله خير بارك الله فيكم جميعا.
Amin, amin. Fi amanillah.
جزاكم الله خيرا دكتور فاطمة دكتور عبد الرحمن بارك الله فيكم.
وإياكم إن شاء الله. عليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.